Hello, and welcome to Finale to Dorico, Conquering the Transition. My name is Jason Loffredo, and I'll be your guide today as we explore some of the features in Dorico that Finale doesn't even have. Yeah, this is going to be a little bit different today. I'm only going to show you Dorico because there's no point in showing you Finale because these features literally don't exist in Finale. I thought this would be good to do for the Finale users coming over to Dorico to sort of see basically what's new for you coming into Dorico. I'm going to give you a very small tutorial on how to do some of this stuff. I'm going to be very quick about it because there's a ton of stuff I want to just kind of show to you, and I will give you links along the way to get you to places with more details. The first thing I want to talk about is flows. We've talked about this in the first and second video, and I think in a previous video as well. Flows is just completely unique to Dorico. No other notation app, Finale included, has anything like flows. And as you see the way I'm using it in this particular file, I've got two flows, and I'm using them for the two movements of this piece. Here's the second movement starting right here. And flows allow you to do things like this, and it will give you new titles and all that stuff. And there's just a ton of flexibility with how flows work with movements in Dorico. But the thing is that flows can be used for a lot of other things besides movements. And I just wanted to show you a completely different file. This one. Now what I did here, this was actually one of the very first Dorico projects I did in version 1 when I first got it. I was curious about the flow situation, so I was thinking about how to use it, and this idea came up. At the time, I was sort of studying the Hanon finger exercises, and the way that the Hanon is originally published, it's all one page for each exercise, and I thought it would be clever to kind of condense it in a way so that I can get more of the exercises on a single page. And it was easy enough to do that because it's all in a pattern. So it's just this bar, and then it goes up a step, and then it goes up another step, and up another step until it hits the end, and then it turns around on a new pattern and goes down a step, all the way to the end. So I figured I could actually get that all on one line, which is what you see here. So this one line is a whole page in the original Hanon exercises. And I said, well, this is a clever way to do it. I can actually get 5 different exercises on a page and reduce the first part from 20 pages to 4. So that's what I did here. And the way that I did this was, these are all flows. If I actually go into engrave mode and show you the way that the page templates are set up, there's actually extra text frames here with the flow title token. It's kind of hard to see because it's at a large size and the box is kind of small, but these are all the same. It's just the flow title token, which means that whatever flow is existing on this line, it's showing me the name of that flow right here, and I've just named the flows by numbers. If you look at the project info, you can see I have 20 different flows, and they're just named 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through 20, etc. So that's how I did this. And what's really clever about this is that now that this is done, I can print it like this and I'm good to go. But because the flows are interchangeable, I can literally just completely change the order. If I wanted to do this exercise one day in a completely different order, if I was getting bored of the original order, I could do that, and all of a sudden now it's 1, 3, 2, 5, 4, 6, 7, 9, 8, 10, etc. And I can reprint this and do it a different way. So I mean, it's just a silly example, but this is one of the ways that the flows can be super powerful in Dorico. And what I'm showing you here is just 2 ways to use flows. There's other things you can do. If you're doing things with movements and pieces and you want to change the key, you can actually duplicate these flows and put it in a different key. So you have the same piece in different keys. You can do alternate versions. You can add instruments to some flows but not others. So you can have the same piece with different instrumentation. There's just a ton of things you can do. And I'm going to share a link of a Tips Tuesday short video that Anthony Hughes did recently called 10 Ways to Use Flows. And it's exactly that. It's just giving you ideas of what to do with these flows. And it's really worth a look. It's a really short video. So yeah, so that's flows. The next thing I want to show you is play and print mode. I touched on this briefly in the very first video, but Command 4 will open play mode. And play mode is essentially a mini DAW. It's a mini digital audio workstation like Logic, or more like Cubase actually. You can see you have your tracks, you have a mixer on the bottom. You know, there's so much to this. I could spend a lot of videos talking about this, but there already is a ton of great videos that Dorico's done on play mode. There's an entire YouTube playlist, so I will link that entire playlist to get you a lot of information about this. I'm just going to barely scratch the surface so you can kind of see what's going on. You do have your tempo headers, and this will show chords if I'm showing chord symbols. And then your tracks, of course, you can switch the tracks, and you have your mute and solo. You do have a mixer down here, which is nice looking. What's going on in the left, you have a track inspector, right? So if I choose alto, you can see where the routing is, the port, the channel, all this stuff. And the other thing that you can do is plug in VSTs and stuff like that. So on the viola track here, you'll see that I'm using Contact. I did the same thing for the piano. And the way this works, just very quickly, is you go over to the VST and MIDI side, and initially you only had this option here, which is the Halion Sonic instrument, but I added this one by pressing the plus button. I chose Contact 8, and then when you do this, if you press this little E button here, this will show the Contact player. And what I did within the Contact player was I actually loaded the entire Cremona quartet from Native Instruments. Even though I only needed the viola, I just loaded all 4 of them. And you get the viola here. I also loaded the piano, and these are all on separate channels. So the piano's on 5, the cello's on 4, viola's on 3, etc. So you have one instance of Contact, and then when you go over to the track inspector for the viola, I know that this is channel 3 on the Contact. So this is how I'm doing all of that routing. With the piano, it's pretty easy, because the pianos, you can just use the default expression map, because there's not a lot of like articulation switching and stuff like that. But if you're familiar with VSTs, you'll know that string instruments, woodwind and brass instruments, they use a lot of articulation switching. So you need to have an expression map for those instruments. And in this case, I did load this Cremona Quartet Viola expression map, which looks like this. If you're familiar with how these work, this window may look familiar. You may kind of be able to figure this out on your own. I believe there are other tutorials about how to use this window in Dorico, but the idea here is that you do have to have all of these set up for legato and pizzicato and all those different articulations, and then use this particular expression map for that instrument. Now, the bad news is that Dorico is not going to come with expression maps for third-party sounds. So you might have to completely design them yourself. The good news is that at this point, there's a lot of people that have been doing this and have been posting them online. And in fact, Dorico themselves have actually added a page on their website just for this, playback templates for Dorico. And it's basically a list of all of the different brands, the types of libraries and everything. And it will tell you on the right whether or not Dorico has a direct download for that particular sample set, or if the best they can do is give you a link to the forum or some other place where you can download an expression map that somebody else did. So in this case, for the Cremona Quartet here, I had to go to the forum, and I found that somebody had actually created this, and it's done really well, and it works. So it's a little bit of setup for using external VSTs, but it's nice that Dorico even has this page here, and I will link this page in the description of the video. So if you're interested in doing that, you can as well. And like I said, you have a mixer down here, but if you choose this second button here, you get to a piano roll, and this is where the play mode of Dorico really shines. I mean, this really is a mini DAW. You have your piano roll editor with the notes. And what's really cool about this editor in particular is that there's 2 sides of it. There's a notated durations, and what you can do is actually expand these durations, and that will actually be reflected in the score when you do that. But if you select this other button, this is the played durations. And what happens is that the notated durations go into a kind of smaller line underneath, and then these bigger lines actually can be moved much more microscopically, so you can really control the exact length that you want that particular note on without actually changing the length of the note in the score. So that's a really clever idea. The other thing you can do, I mean, there's all kinds of automation lanes at the bottom for velocity. You can even do CC1. And what I did in this particular file, I started to record in some CC1 and CC11 data on the viola part. And that's what you're seeing here, all these little undulations here is what I did with a fader. And I did that all the way up until about bar 13. And then I just stopped, and you can see what Dorico is doing sort of with that data automatically. It's amazing. You can record all this stuff, and it just makes it sound so much real. So if you're into this kind of thing, it's not going to be Cubase or it's not going to be Logic, but you're going to get a lot of features, a lot more than you think you would in Dorico. Certainly compared to Finale, you had like none of this basically. So yeah, this is just a really cool extra part of Dorico that Finale doesn't even come close to. And also Dorico, the 5th mode here is print mode. This is kind of just a simple interface for printing, and it's the way that it works is that you can kind of select one or multiple parts over on the left, and whatever you do on the right will export or print those particular parts. So if I wanted PDFs of the viola and the piano part, what I would do is I select these two, and instead of sending it to the printer, I'd send it to graphics. I can choose PDFs. There's a couple other different formats you can choose, whether it's in color or mono. For certain ones of these, you can choose the resolution, the destination folder. There's all kinds of things. You can choose the particular flows that you want, or print all of them, or print page ranges. So you can do like 1 to 2. You can even do 1 to 2, comma 4, and that would print pages 1, 2, and 4 for the viola and piano part. Just a ton of flexibility in here. There's other things with page setups and annotations. So it's just a nifty little user interface for printing that kind of puts everything all in one place for you. All right, so there's a whole lot of other things I want to show you, but I do need to switch to another file. So I'm going to come back to you in just a second. All right, so I've got a new file open. I'm going to show you a couple more things here, starting with condensing. I think I may have mentioned this before, but just getting a little bit further into the weeds here. So the way that condensing works in Dorico is that you start with individual instruments and then allow Dorico to condense them together. Now, this is backwards from Finale. If you've done anything with shared staff in Finale, you know that you have to start with a shared staff, enter all the notes that you need in that shared staff, and then somehow or another kind of expand them or explode them into individual parts. It is completely backwards in Dorico. So coming from Finale, you do have to kind of reverse your thinking a little bit. And the way this works is you write in the individual staffs, and then while you're in write or engrave mode, go to the edit menu. It's about 2/3 of the way down. It's this option called condensing. Now this has a shortcut you see here, but I programmed this shortcut. So by default, this won't be here. I just use this feature so much that I thought it was worth having this shortcut. So for me, it's option command C. And you'll see that everything will get condensed together. So those two flute parts are now on a single staff. And Dorico will sort of intelligently condense it in certain ways. If it's simple and can be done in a single voice like it is in the flutes, it will do that. But in the clarinets, where there's some dovetailing going on, it's going to use multiple voices and stuff like that. So there are a lot of parameters about how this is all set up in the engraving options and in the layout options, which you can certainly control, and certainly control how the numbers are showing. It'll show A2 at a certain point if both instruments go back to playing together. So there's just a lot of control in engraving and layout options. There's a few things to know about condensing in general in Dorico. The first is that you actually can't write in the condensed staff. So if I go into my oboe part, you can see I can get the input caret and everything, but I can't do that in the flute staff. I can't do that in the clarinet staff. You can't write in the combined staffs. You have to uncondense in order to start writing, which is part of the reason why I have that shortcut, so I can go back and forth quickly. Incidentally, the other thing you can do is if you go to galley or fill view, it will always show uncondensed. So if you don't want to turn condensing on and off, you can just switch to galley or fill view instead. But anyway, now that you see both instruments, now you can actually write in those individual staffs. And related to this, one of the cool features about Dorico is the ability to expand the input caret. So if I were to press shift down, you'll see that my input caret will get expanded to all of the strings there. And then if I just play a chord on my MIDI keyboard, all 4 of those chords will get entered all at once. So it kind of makes writing on multiple staffs a lot easier. You know, in Finale, you're used to writing, 4-note chords on a single staff and then exploding it later. Again, you have to do it backwards, and having the ability to expand the input caret greatly helps with that process, because now you can write on multiple staffs at the same time. So let me just go here and turn on condensing one more time. The other thing that's worth knowing is kind of the basic principle for how Dorico condenses, insofar as the scope of the condensing and the idea that Dorico's choosing different kinds of condensing for different phrases. Like obviously for the flutes, it's using one voice. For the clarinets, in some places, it's using multiple voices. And it goes back and forth depending on the situation. The thing to know is that Dorico considers this in phrases. And a phrase to Dorico for condensing purposes means everything between a rest. So for this clarinet 1 part, it starts on this A and ends on the C, because after the C in the clarinet one part is essentially a rest, right? So that is a single phrase. And then the clarinet 2 starts on beat 2 and ends on beat 2 of bar 3, right? So it's considering all of these phrases, and it's going back and forth between the type of condensing. And you can see specifically on this clarinet part, it's one voice, right? The upstem voice for clarinet 1. And then for the first 2 beats, it's showing 2 voices, and then going back to 1 voice for beat 3, and then back to 2 voices and going back and forth. Now, this may be fine. You may be happy with that, but sometimes you might decide that, okay, it might look better if it just stayed as 2 voices, starting from measure 2 onwards. And you can absolutely make manual condensing changes. In engrave mode, what you do is just select the beat where you want that to start. So I'm going to select this F, and I'm going to go into the engrave menu. There's an option here for condensing change. Now this pulls up a rather intimidating looking window, but just know that all of these options are also available sort of in a different way in the engraving options. So this is kind of related to it. Basically what you're doing is you're overriding the engraving options on a case-by-case basis. The way that this window works is that you choose something on the left. So in this case, I'm making a change to the clarinet part. Make sure that's selected so that whatever you're changing here is affecting that, but you also have to check it to tell Dorico to definitely make a change to the clarinet part. So I've checked that, and then I'm going to find the thing that I'm looking for. Now, in this case, what I want to do is I want to show the rests in beat 3 and 4 in clarinet 1. So I just know that this is this option here, hide rests for inactive players. Except if I check that, then it's going to hide the rest, which is the opposite of what I want to do. In fact, I want to show the rest. So interestingly, unchecking this makes this a double negative in a way. So now with this checked and this unchecked, you're saying definitely show the rests for the inactive players. And when you click OK, it will do just that. And you'll see that you'll get the entire whole rest for clarinet 1, and this looks a little bit more consistent going forward. So later on, let's see if I go down to measure, I think 15, if I wanted to go back to the other way of doing it, I can choose here. And actually, what's interesting is on condensed staffs, you can't select rest, so I can't actually put this on beat 1, but you can actually choose anywhere. So if I choose the oboe part here, go into engrave condensing change, just because I chose the oboe, I can still put that condensing change on beat 1 of that measure. So again, select clarinet, check it, and I'm going to find that same option, hide rest for inactive players, and I could check this to have the reverse option, or I can just reset it, which is usually a better choice. This resets condensing for that staff. And it will sort of go back to doing things automatically. So I'm just going to reset that particular condensing, click OK, and you'll see that we'll go back to the other way of condensing where it's a single voice, just labeling it number 2 and then number 1 as needed. And there is a lot to this. As you can see, incidentally, if you double click, you get back to this window. As you can see, there's a ton of options here with very specific language and how this works. I'm going to link to something that John Barron did, one of the Discover Dorico videos that he did called Demystifying Condensing. It is a very extensive look at how all of this works. So if you do a lot of stuff with condensed staffs, I highly recommend you watch through that video because he has some amazing tips, very, very specific tips about how all of this works. So I suggest you do that. One final tip I'm going to give you, though, is I'm going to show you something here. If you look at the trumpet part, it looks like there's nothing else. There's nothing else in the trumpet part, right? And you're wondering why it's the same rhythm. Why didn't Dorico choose to actually use a single stem here? You see I have different things going on. Just it doesn't make sense that it's not condensing that properly. The one thing that you really do have to be careful about is that the parts are exactly the same. And if you look really closely, you can see that there's a missing staccato on trumpet 2, and that is enough for Dorico to think that the trumpet 1 and trumpet 2 parts are actually different. So if you ever get something like this and wonder why it's not putting it on the same stem, the first thing you should do is check to make sure that both parts are exactly the same. And if you uncondense it, you'll see that your staccato dot is missing, so you can just go back to write mode and add that staccato dot back. And when you condense, it's still not showing, right? It's still not condensing. Well, if you look even closer, it's because the hairpins aren't in the same position. You see that? Oops. This one starts on this 16th, and this one actually starts on the second 16th. So if I drag that, I think that should solve it. And now all of a sudden, yeah, so now they're in the same voice. So when you're dealing with condensing, you do have to make sure that those parts are exactly the same, like precisely the same. A lot of times what I'll do when I'm working like this is I'll actually copy and paste markings, especially dynamics, between parts, so I'm absolutely certain that they are the same and they will condense properly. The other feature I want to talk about in this file is cues, and this is really, really cool in Dorico. So if I'm looking at this trumpet part, the trumpets don't play until the 8th bar. Let me just uncondense here for a second, go back to write mode. You can see the trumpets don't play until bar 8. Well, if I want to say give them some sort of cue, let's say I want to cue the horns. It's so easy in Dorico. What you do is you actually select the measures and just press Shift U. This pulls up the cues pop over, And all you do is start typing in the name of the instrument, and it will give you a bunch of different options. And I believe that this is horn 1. So you choose horn 1, and you'll get a signpost for horn 1. Nothing shows up here, right? The reason for that is that cues shouldn't be shown in the score. They're only shown in the part. So the cues automatically will get hidden in the score. But if I go to the trumpet 1 part, you'll now see that I have my horn cued there, and it's got the opposing rest. It's in a cue size, and it's just unbelievable how quick this is. And the great thing is that this is like an extendable thing, so you can extend that cue to the end or shorten it or whatever. You can actually keep on going with it if you need to, and overlap the actual music. There's just so much flexibility. And what's really amazing about cues in Dorico is that they are completely dynamic. So if I were to go back to the score and change the horn part, if I just, let's put that B up to an E, for example, and go back to the trumpet part, that is now updated, right? So it's super, super cool how this works. Let me do one more to show you another feature about this. I'm going to go to bar 25, I believe. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cue the flute part in the horn part, right? So I'm just going to take the horn select here, and again, Shift U, start typing flute, choose flute 1. Again, it won't show in the score, but once I go into the horn 1 part, you will see the cue. And the cues have properties, and you can see that this is really super high for the French horn. This has to do partly with the transposition and everything. So this may not be exactly how you want to show this. You might want to show this an octave lower. Well, what's great about these cues is that they have properties in the properties panel. So if you Command 8 to open the properties, and if you have that cue selected, you'll see a whole bunch of options. One of them over here is the octave shift. So if you select that button and just choose down an octave, it will put the notes down an octave, and it will change the marking so that it says flute 1 8 VA, so just to tell the horn player that it's up an octave. There's a ton of other things you can do. You can choose to show slurs or not show slurs. It will not show slurs by default. Again, there's settings for this in the engraving options, I believe. So you can always show slurs or always show dynamics or whatever it is that you want. Or you can override them with the properties panel by checking these options. Other things you can do is turn it into a rhythmic cue, and that will just give you the rhythms across the top here. You can even show rhythmic slashes instead of actual notes. So, I mean, it's just incredible how flexible this cue feature is. And again, there's nothing like this in Finale. So this is honestly one of my favorite features in Dorico. Just the ability to do that so easily is really super cool. All right, there's more I want to show you, but I have to start opening other files. So once again, sit tight and I will be back in a jiffy. Let's talk about Divisi in Dorico. So I've got this Adagio for Strings, the Samuel Barber piece, which uses a whole bunch of different varying types of Divisi throughout. And if you look closely, you see the very first system, the violin 2 and the cello are Divisi. Again, on the second system, but on the next system, it's just the cello. The violin 2 goes back to unison, then everybody's unison, and then the cello split. Violin 2 viola. I mean, the Divisis change all over this piece in different ways, right? And this is all handled automatically in Dorico. In Finale, in order to do this, you'd have to set up, extra staves for each of these instruments and hide and show them as needed. But if you check out setup mode, there's really only 5 instruments here. It's just the standard string orchestra, right? I'm not doing anything special. The one thing I will mention about Divisi staves is that you do have to have section players in order for the Divisi feature to work. Divisi will not work for single players, so if you're doing string Divisi, just make sure that you're absolutely choosing the section string players here. And so this is all done automatically. I was able to pretty easily, do all of these Divisis in this this piece pretty quickly. And I'll just demo real quick how to do this. I don't have any Divisi on the bass staff, so I'll just add a Divisi bass for half a second here. Let's say the first couple systems here you don't want, or you want a second part, maybe your basses don't have the extension. So what you're going to do is you're going to select the first measure here, and if you right click or control click, you can get into the staff option here, and you're going to choose Change Divisi. And what you'll get is this window, and at the top you'll notice there's just a unison option here. But what you can do is you can either add an extra section division or you can add solo divisions. There's different things you can do here, but I'm just going to add an extra section division, and now you'll see it goes to 1 and 2. And as soon as I hit OK, you're going to see that you now have 2 different staffs for the double bass. And what I can do is, let's say up to here, I'm just going to duplicate that in the next system, and then I'm going to take all of this and move that up an octave, right? And just like that, you have your Divisi, you get your brackets and everything. And then what you can do here is when it goes back to unison on the third system here, again, right click to get to staff, we're going to choose restore unison. And what's really clever is that for the rest of the system, it's going to just duplicate the notes, right? So you're seeing the top part in both parts. Sorry, let me zoom in so you can see that. So you'll see the top note in both parts. And interestingly, if you select a note here, it will select it in both places. If you move the note, it will move in both places. So it's the bottom staff from this point forward is just sort of like a reflection of the top staff. They are independent here. You can see I can do things differently with these notes, but these are like linked because this is technically a unison. But when it goes back to the next system, you'll see that it will go back to a single staff and you'll have your unison as it is before. So that's a really, really quick demo of how that works. Again, there's other things you can do. You saw in that Divisi window with soloists and glialtry and all that stuff. Again, I'm going to send you to another Anthony Hughes video about Divisi all the way back in version 2, and all of that information in that video is still valid in version 6. So really, really helpful to show you exactly how to do that. We'll show you how to do things with naming the Divisi staffs and all that stuff. So yeah, Divisi and Dorico is really cool, and it's really, really easy. And incidentally, this will also work on vocal staffs. As long as the vocalists are set up as section players, then it will work. Again, single players won't go into Divisi, but section players will. All right, onward to something else. I'll be right back with a new file. Brand new in version 6 is Cutaway Scores, and just in Dorico fashion, they've made it super, super simple. It's literally just checking an option to create a cutaway score. So I've got this old score that I was working on, and if I want to make this into a cutaway score, go into the layout options. You're looking for the staves and systems section, looking for cutaways. There's a handful of options here, but if you just select the first one and hit apply, and in a few seconds it's going to calculate the cutaways, and just like that you have a cutaway score. It's just that simple. Now there's some options in the engraving options for cutaway scores, including what to do with staff line protrusions and the systemic bar lines and all that stuff. Just a few options there if you want to change those around. And of course you can make manual changes too. So if I wanted to not cut away these bars right here, just for that single bar, you can make a manual cutaway change so that you can show just flute 3 or whatever you want to show. But there's other options here. Let me just show you this one in particular. Minimum number of empty bars before cutting away. Actually just changing that to 2 in this particular scenario will fix that one in particular, but may change other ones that you might not want to. But again, you know, right click, there are manual cutaways, start cutaways, end cutaways. I'm sort of glossing through this because yet again, there's another great Anthony Hughes video on cutaway scores, which I will link to in the video description. And it's very easy to do coordination lines. Like sometimes with cutaway scores, you end up with these sort of floating measures here, which isn't great because you don't know if it's a new system or whatnot. So you can just connect them. So just in engrave mode, you know, select the 2 bar lines here, and there's a new button over here on the left called Create Coordination Line, and it will do just that. I can connect it here as well, and you can create a coordination line like that. You can even coordinate lines between notes. So I can select these 2 notes and do coordination line, and it will connect those 2. So a ton of flexibility, a ton of options here, and just, I mean, how simple is it to do cutaway scores in Dorico now? So yeah, that's new as of version 6, so really cool feature. All right, and again, I'm going to switch over to another file, so give me 1 second. And there's several more features I want to highlight with this particular file that I just kind of threw together. The first being proofreading. Proofreading is, again, new as of version 6. If you look at the right panel, all the way at the bottom, there's this new sort of proofreading option looks like a little checklist, and you can see that there's currently 10 things that it's looking at, right? So if I click that proofreading button, you'll see all of the things that it's looking for. And Dorico is looking for a lot of things, and it's very algorithmic. So, it's going to look for very specific items in a lot of categories, and you can sort of see the color-coded nature of them. And you can kind of just see what's going on here. For one, it's saying that the pizzicato technique intended to be used on stringed instruments only. And you can see that if you actually select that, it will sort of highlight it in the score for you. You can see where that is. Let me do that one more time, zoomed in a little bit more so you can see it. You select that and it starts to highlight the pizzicato. This can happen a lot if you copy and paste and forget to delete the pizzicato marking. And what happens is that Dorico is constantly calculating these proofreadings. So if you fix it, if I just delete that pizzicato marking, in a couple seconds, that particular proofreading item will go away, and now my list is down to 9. So this proofreading is dynamic. As you're writing in the score, it will add things that it finds. So let's look at a couple of the others. I'll come back to the guitar in a second. So the first one for the violin here is telling me that multiple notes require the same string. So if I click it, yeah, it's going to show me. So the A sharp and the C sharp, you can only get those notes on the G string. So this particular double stop is impossible. So, I don't know how you can change that to a different note, and that should go away because now that double stop is possible. Same thing here. This one, the stretch is too great. It looks for all kinds of things. It looks for things that are impossible. It looks for things that are probably not possible. This one in the guitar is saying that the stretch is at the verge of playability. So it even goes into different levels of correction here. It'll check for things like this where you have a repeated bass clef. This could happen if you had a tenor clef moment and forgot to delete that bass clef. So you just select that and delete it, and that particular proofreading item will go away. It finds a lot of these. Well, I guess I should speak for myself because I'm always forgetting them. Consider adding restating dynamic on first note of a chord following silence. So for bar 8, it's going to say, yeah, it's been a while since you've had a dynamic. It's probably a good idea to add another one. So, okay, add a mezzo forte, and that proofreading item will go away. Again, an arco technique for horn due to copying and pasting. Yeah, it's just really cool, all the different types of things that it can find. The other thing is that sometimes, you may want to ignore it. Like in the case of the guitar, so yeah, I just wrote these chords in here. I put them in. I really wasn't intending the guitarist to play those chords because really what I wanted to do was just turn this into rhythmic slashes with stems. And it doesn't matter what notes are underneath, the player is going to look at this. So these particular items for the guitar proofreading really are not important. So what's nice is that Dorico allows you to hide them, and there's this little eye icon, and when you do that, those items go away, and you're good to go. And now I have 3 items left. The other thing that's nice is that you can actually filter out for certain categories. So if you go into the categories here, you can say, I don't really want you to check for clefs or pickup bars or anything like that. And you can see all the different types of categories that are being checked for. So, you can deselect the ones that you really don't care about proofreading for, or you can turn it off completely. And for some people, I know that this is a thing. I think it's called notification anxiety or something. If this bothers you, just seeing this all the time, down at the bottom here, there's an on-off switch. So it will turn off proofreading, permanently or until you turn it back on. And then once you're ready to actually look at the proofreading thing, you can go over here and enable the proofreading, and it will recalculate everything again. So if you really do suffer from notification anxiety, you can certainly turn that off. Now, the one thing is it won't proofread for certain things. And you note that my flute part here has a red note. This is because that A is out of range for the flute, but that's not showing up in the proofreading. Part of that's because it's sort of proofreading it in a different way. It's turning it red. There's that option in the view menu for notes and rest colors, notes out of range. So this is sort of a separate a la carte type of proofreading in itself, and you can actually turn that on or off if you need to. Sorry, you have to select none. There you go. Or turn that back on to show that. That's a different type of proofreading, and if you change the note to a different one, obviously that note is playable, so it will turn black again. There's something similar going on with the harp part, but the thing is these notes are not necessarily out of range. Dorico does another thing with harp where it's showing you where you need to have a harp pedal change. And what happens initially is that Dorico assumes that the harp pedal is set to all naturals. So because of the key signature, it's saying the C sharp, the G sharp, these are not playing with the harp pedal set to all naturals. So you have to add a harp diagram. What's really cool in Dorico is that they have a way to automatically calculate the harp diagrams. And if you just select the first note here and you go into the write mode and you go down to the bottom of this section here, there's this option called Calculate Harp Pedals. And what it will do is it's only going to put a signpost in the score, because generally you don't want to show the harp pedal diagram in the score. You only want to show it in the part. So it put that signpost there telling me what the pedal is, but it's not showing it. Again, if I go into the harp part, it will actually show the harp pedal diagram for me, which is super, super cool. And it will basically calculate from this point on as far as it can get until you need another change. And when you get to this one here, again, it's showing red because it's saying, well, you know, you can't play this A sharp with this harp pedal setup. So what you can do is, you know, maybe select this note here and do the same thing, calculate harp pedal, and now it will add that A sharp to the pedal. And again, you need another change, so you can do it here. And you can keep going basically until all of the red is gone. So I can do this passage in 3 harp pedal changes. And again, they won't show in the score, but they will show up in the part itself. What's really cool is that if you don't want to do it that way, if you really want to do it manually, in the techniques panel over here, all the way in the bottom for harp pedals, there's this really nifty kind of graphic here, which allows you to change the harp pedals however you want it. You can set it whichever way you want it and then press create, and it will create that harp pedal diagram in that rhythmic spot just like that. That was kind of a nonsense one, but you get the idea. So yeah, harp pedals in Dorico are super cool, super easy, especially that calculate harp pedal diagram option. Super easy to use in the, sorry, you got to be in the right menu there, calculate harp pedals. Really cool feature. There's a couple more features I just want to get through, so let me show you. In Dorico, there's a whole section for scripting. And the way that this works is super, super cool. You literally all you have to do is start recording a macro and then do something in Dorico and then press end recording, and you'll get that script at the top of this menu. I already have one here that I programmed called Q-sized. I'll show you that in a second, but I'll show you how to actually create them. So let's say, for example, I want a script that deletes slurs. Well, in order to delete slurs out of a large passage, you have to do 2 things. You have to select the passage, then you have to go into the edit menu and choose filter and look for slurs, and that will filter out all the slurs, and then press the delete key. It's not difficult, but it's a couple steps, right? Let me just undo that. We can actually script that entire process. So again, what I'm going to do, just select all of this passage. I'm going to go to script. I'm going to do start recording macro, and it looks like nothing's happening, but it's actually recording. So the first thing that you do is actually going to get recorded. So once again, I'm going to go to the edit menu. I'm going to go to filter. I'm going to find slurs. That's the first operation. And then I'm going to press the delete key on my computer keyboard. And then when I'm done, I'm just going to go back to this script menu and choose end recording macro. And it's going to ask you to name it. I'm going to call it delete slurs and save. And just like that, I have a new script in my menu here under the script menu called delete slurs. So if I undo that process of deleting them, right, I can now select this passage again and choose delete slurs, and it will do that automatically for me. And this can get as complicated as you want. So that was just a very simple one, but you can do 2, 3, 4, 7, 9, 15 steps, right? If you have a procedure that you do over and over and over again, that's multiple steps, that would be a thing that you can do. The one that I scripted here for the cue size, I did for an interesting reason. Like if you have something like this, in order to make something cue size, what you do is you go into the properties panel, and where it says scale, you can choose cue size. The problem with doing it that way is that it doesn't, it changes the grace notes to be the same size as the regular notes. So what you would have to do is then select these and choose cue grace notes, right? So it's actually 2 different operations with 2 different selections. It's a little bit too cumbersome for my taste, right? So I'm just going to undo all of that. What I ended up doing with the script is that I had it first, go in here and change everything to cue size, and then I had to go in here with everything still selected, and I had filter chosen, and there's an option for grace notes, and then choose the scale for cue size grace notes, right? So I did that all in one shot, and when I did that, and I'm just going to deselect that one there, now I can run this script called cue sized, and you'll see that all happen. So it changed the main notes to cue size, it changed the grace notes to cue grace notes. So again, that was several steps that I was able to script fairly quickly using this feature here and just run it, in one shot. So that's another example. And the possibilities, again, are completely endless. So really cool feature that you can do this directly in Dorico. Now, technically, I'm cheating here. There was something called Finale script in Finale, but if you're familiar with that, you know how wonky that was. You know how sort of outdated the coding language of that was and how difficult it was to use. This version in Dorico is super, super easy. It's WYSIWYG. You do what you want and it records it and you're good to go. So yeah, that's scripts in Dorico. I've mentioned this before, but Dorico allows you to program your own shortcuts, and this is definitely unique. You could not do this in Finale. If you wanted to program shortcuts, you had to use an outside program like Keyboard Maestro, but in the preferences for Dorico under key commands, there are actions for everything. Anything you can think of, practically, there's an action for, and if you want to do something like you can actually choose the run script one here. So let's say if I start typing run script, I can choose the run script. Run last script already actually has one selected here, but the run script shortcut, I have no idea what's available for me. Let me just try this one. So you select in here, you press something, and then choose add key command. So this particular keystroke now is that run script option. So if I go back and choose this one now, command option R, which is the one I just did, that run script option will pull up all of the scripts that I have available, and I can choose the delete slurs, for example, and it will go ahead and do that. Again, shortcuts, you can program your own, something you really could not do in Finale. And as you get deeper and deeper into Dorico, I really recommend that you find the things that you're using a lot and program shortcuts for it. The thing is that Dorico made a conscious decision not to pre-program too many shortcuts, because I think they realized that people use the program for different things. And so some people may never use chords, for example. So anything related to chords wouldn't make sense for them to have shortcuts used up for chords, right? So, there's a lot of common things that made sense to have shortcuts, and those are programmed, but there's also a lot of things that just are available to you to program on your own. So take advantage of the fact that Dorico is allowing you to do that. And then the other unique feature in Dorico, sort of related to shortcuts, is what Dorico calls the jump bar. And the jump bar is triggered just by the letter J on your keyboard. And you get this little thing here, and what you can do with this is really cool. First of all, there's two sides of it. There's a command side and a go-to side. And the shortcuts to switch between these on a Mac is Control 1 and 2. 1 for commands, 2 for go-to. On Windows, I believe it's Alt-C and Alt-G, I believe. But anyways, there's two sides to this. And what you do is you just type. Like if I want to do something with beams, right? Just start typing beams, and a whole bunch of options will come up related to beams. So let's say I wanted to look at the beam grouping options. I just select that, and it takes me right to the beam grouping options in the notation options, right? Now this is a little bit context sensitive too. So if you had nothing selected, choosing beams, it's thinking, well, maybe he just wants to look at the general look of the beams. But if I actually select something with a beam and do the same thing and start typing, incidentally, when you use it, it will always pull up the last thing that you had selected. So if you need to do things multiple times, just pressing J and return will do that over and over and over again. But again, I can just start typing beams again, and you'll see now I have a kind of different list. The beam together option comes up here, and it also gives me the shortcut if there's one programmed to that, which is nice. In this case, the split beam is right here, and it's also showing me, I think these are custom shortcuts that I made as well. So again, you can just choose that and it will split the beams for you. So really cool feature that you just, do the thing that you want, and just start typing, and let's beam back together, and it's good to go. Really cool, especially as you're new and you're sort of learning where things are. Sometimes it can be frustrating not remembering where it is. Just press J and start typing, and most likely you'll find the thing that you're looking for. The other part of this is if you go to the go-to side of it, so Control 2, I can do things like B23 to go to bar 23, and that should send me to roughly bar 23. You can also type things like FN for next flow, or FP for flow previous, P3 for page 3, all kinds of things that you can do in the jump bar go to. Let's see if we can do page 6, right? It'll jump me to page 6. So a lot of nifty options in the jump bar. And there's one other thing related to the jump bar and shortcuts in particular. So again, in the preferences for key commands, let's do that thing, script again. Let's find that shortcut for run script. At the bottom of this key commands option, there's what's called a jump bar alias. Now, the thing about the jump bar is that you kind of have to type, but if you do something over and over and over again, you can actually create a jump bar alias. So if I just type the letter R here and add that as an alias, hit close. Now when I go to the jump bar and press R, oops, I got to be on the right side of the jump bar and press R, it'll bring me directly to the run script command. So I don't even have to keep writing run script. JR return will do run script for me now. So, I mean, the possibilities are endless with how you can program keyboard shortcuts and jump bar aliases and jump bar itself and the scripts. I mean, the flexibility here is really incredible. And I just wanted to give you a short introduction to that. And once again, there's a Discovering Dorico video that John Barron did, all about shortcuts, jump bars, aliases, and scripts and everything. I mean, he goes into much more details about all of that stuff. It's definitely worth a watch if you're interested in that. All right, so I've been speaking for a while. There was a lot of extra features in Dorico that Finale didn't have that I just wanted to point out. Many of these features I've been finding super, super useful. So I encourage you to explore these a little bit. And yeah, so that's all I've got for this video. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. And I will see you soon on the next video.